Well, hello and a very warm welcome back to the Andrew Eborn Show. Today, I'm delighted that I'm the wonderful guest, Ben Habib, and we've been looking at policies, not quite policies yet, but your thoughts on what might be policies going forward. We talked about the Windsor Framework, just so that everybody understands. What I like to do on this show is unpack jargon for those who may not know. Talk to me about what the Windsor Framework actually is.
Okay, so the Windsor Framework is a new name given to what was previously known as the Northern Ireland Protocol, which was part of the withdrawal agreement that Boris Johnson signed with the EU. And under the Northern Ireland Protocol, effectively the United Kingdom took the knee to the notion that there can't be a border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. Politicians in the United Kingdom effectively bought the nonsense that having a border between Northern Ireland, which is part of the United Kingdom, and the Republic of Ireland, which is a separate country, would somehow breach the Good Friday Agreement, the Belfast Agreement, and cause violence to resurge on the island of Ireland. This was a threat effectively made by Leo Varadkar during the Brexit negotiations. I think the threat was first made at a summit in 2018 that if you put a border on the island of Ireland, there will be a resumption of violence. Actually, this is a really important point, so I hope viewers pick it up. The Good Friday Agreement, the Belfast Agreement, as it's also known, it explicitly recognizes the border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. Um, that was the whole point of the Good Friday Agreement. It was to get the nationalists, the IRA, Sinn Féin, and all that lot, to accept that Northern Ireland is part of the United Kingdom and to give up their claim to it. And when we left the EU, there was nothing contrary in the Good Friday Agreement that would have prevented us from putting customs checks on the border with the Republic. Indeed, even those physical customs checks and with modern technology wouldn't have been necessary. And that was what had been advocated by Theresa May's government, that we don't even need physical checks on the border. There'll be no military installations. There'll be no customs installations. We can do all of this using smart technology away from the border. And the EU accepted that. But for reasons that are not clear to me, and I think largely due to the fact that our political class wanted to screw up Brexit, they bought this nonsense narrative. Boris Johnson signed the Northern Ireland Protocol, which effectively left Northern Ireland behind in the European Union, subject to dynamic alignment with European. Dynamic alignment means that as the European Union changes its law, Northern Ireland automatically adopts that law. So which, by the way, is also a breach of human rights because you're obliged under human rights to be democratically governed. Whereas Northern Ireland, the British people have no representation in the EU, yet it's aligning with EU laws, adopting EU laws, completely anti the human rights provisions. And so Northern Ireland now is subject to foreign laws made by a foreign legislature, adjudicated by a foreign court. And that has resulted, naturally, in a border being placed between Great Britain and Northern Ireland. Rishi Sunak tried to hoodwink us all by saying that his slight tweaks to the Northern Ireland Protocol, which he called the Windsor Framework, had got rid of the border. He created things like green lanes rather than having to have customs checks on everything. But actually, a green lane is no more than a customs check because in order to get into the green lane, you've got to convince people that actually you shouldn't be in the red lane. Are you with me?
Yeah.
So the border very much exists between Great Britain and Northern Ireland. And you're wearing a poppy. I haven't had a chance to get one. You can't even move poppies from Great Britain to Northern Ireland without going through customs checks. Now, think about that. Many Ulstermen died fighting for the United Kingdom's independence. Many in various wars. And they can't at the moment wear a British poppy made in Great Britain without the EU having checked it on the way across.
Right.
Just think about that for a moment. It's kind of it gets my gut. So the Windsor Framework is a terrible arrangement which has broken the United Kingdom. And I fought a court case on it, and I have a Supreme Court ruling which says the Acts of Union, which created the UK, had been broken by the Windsor Framework. There can be no Brexit. There can be no our leaving the EU properly. There can be no independence, even for Great Britain, from the EU while the Windsor Framework stays in place. It has to go.
Yeah. Now you've obviously got DUP are eyeing reform pacts. You've got TUV talks ongoing. How do you avoid, and this is the criticism that people often throw at you, how do you avoid splitting the unionist votes and handing seats to Sinn Féin?
The DUP is not a unionist party. Now, that's going to offend the DUP, perhaps, but they're not. The DUP, their leader, claimed that there is no Irish Sea border. Their current leader, Gavin Robinson, came on television in January 2024, just after it, and said there is no Irish Sea border. This guy shouldn't be anywhere near what he describes as a unionist party. He's a liar. And so the DUP are not unionist. I know they won't like it if they hear this. They won't like it. I've said it before. They won't like it. They cut up rough when I say it, but they are. They're not unionists. Sammy Wilson keeps talking about his unionist credentials. Why is he in a party that claims there isn't a border when there isn't when there is a border? The only true unionists in Northern Ireland are the traditional unionist voice, led by a guy called Jim Allister, um, and Jim and I are close, TUV and I are close. But we've got to get over this nonsense about splitting the vote. It's up to the electorate to decide who they're going to vote for. And one thing that is very damaging, I think, to British politics is that Northern Ireland is under a separate political framework for even to register in Northern Ireland as a political party is a separate process. And there's no real there are no political parties. Tories technically stand in Northern Ireland, but they don't. There's no political party that covers all of the United Kingdom. Now, no wonder there are splits between Great Britain and Northern Ireland if we don't have a party that covers everything. So, my aim for Advance is to make sure that we have representation in Northern Ireland one way or another.
Yeah.
Absolutely, we have to. We're obliged to do it.
Yeah, and as I say, it's a criticism they always say, and every time we do these interviews, they all say, "Well, all you're doing is splitting the vote. Reform the party we've got to vote for. You're just throwing a spanner in the works and handing it to Starmer." Your answer is the same to both, isn't it?
Absolutely. Reform doesn't stand for the democratic unit of the United Kingdom. Reform got up with their mass deportation policy the other day and said that the ECHR would be removed from Great Britain, but not Northern Ireland because of the Good Friday Agreement and because of other arrangements made with the EU. Now, why would Reform, if it claims to be pro-British sovereignty, take the knee to the ECHR and the EU? Please clip this bit, Andrew, and put it out. Reform took the knee to the EU and the ECHR. But more importantly, perhaps as far as their mass deportation policy was concerned, was when they said the ECHR would not be removed from Northern Ireland, what they were telling every illegal migrant in Great Britain where it was going to be removed is that go to Northern Ireland and you'll be safe. We're going to remove it from Great Britain, but if you go to Northern Ireland, you'll be safe. In other words, they created a safe haven for illegal migrants in Northern Ireland through their own deportation policy. That's what Reform did. Reform should be nowhere near government. They don't understand the very basics of how things operate. If you're going to remove the ECHR from the United Kingdom, it has to go from the entire United Kingdom, not just from Great Britain. Otherwise, your mass deportation policy doesn't work. Uh, And so there's no splitting of vote. Reform doesn't know what it's doing. It's a great campaigning machine. It doesn't know its arse from its elbow when it comes to constitutional or other political matters. Clip that bit too.
There you go. So no, it's all good stuff. We love the clips, Ben. It's got to be good. Let's talk about border enforcement and immigration. Then it's the hot topic. Horrible, horrible news, obviously, about Wayne Broadhurst murdered by an
Yeah.
ILR holding illegal immigrant. You want all Labour era ILR revoked and deportations to the maximum. Only 10,000 deportations a year. How many ships, detention centres, and staff will you build, and how do you intend to pay for it?
We'll build as many as is required to get the job done, no matter how long it takes to do it, and no matter how expensive. The price of detaining all illegal migrants and deporting them is a drop in the ocean compared to embracing them and keeping them in our society. And I'm not just talking about the monetary price, there's also a huge human, cultural, and constitutional price to pay by not deporting illegal migrants. It doesn't matter how expensive it is. You cut foreign aid, you cut foreign benefits to foreigners, you cut welfare to British people who are not working, can perfectly well work, and you make sure you've got the money to identify who these illegal migrants are, build the detention centers, and then put them through those detention centers all the way back home. And if their home countries won't take them, then you impose sanctions on their home countries. You withdraw aid, you cease to trade with them, and so on. You make it very, very difficult for these
Yeah.
countries if they
You
won't
say,
take
I
their
mean,
people
as you say,
back.
you have to ensure you get the money. Where does the money come from?
I said uh, we're spending 10 billion a year, for example, on illegal migrants, on benefits for foreigners. Cut that.
Cut that.
Cut our foreign aid budget, 14 billion a year. Get rid of that. There's 24 billion
Yeah.
just there.
24 billion there.
Two,
And also the whole net zero thing will save you a few billion.
50 billion a year by the government's own assessment.
Okay.
So
No,
there's
no,
74 billion.
it's important to emphasize
You
that
can make
point.
savings. You can make savings like this.
Yeah.
People say you can't balance the books. Nonsense. They can't balance the books. Look at the government debt level now, higher than it's ever been as a percentage of GDP. They can't govern the books the way they're governing. Keeping the illegal migrants here, or getting rid of them rather, is going to be such a small cost compared to keeping them
Yeah,
here.
no, absolutely. And I always say it's important to have the measures and to emphasize how that's going to be paid for, because that's the mistake that so many people make. You say that dinghies would be stopped in the Channel. Would Advance UK authorize RNLI style interceptions with force if necessary? And how would that square with the ECHR non-refoulement rules you're ditching?
Well, the ECHR ain't going to be there, so they're not going to be able to stop us from doing this. And we will have the Royal Navy, an arm of the Royal Navy, trained up specifically for this job with fast boats, sensors, barricades, drones, whatever's necessary to intercept these dinghies and peaceably require them to go back to France. And this is perfectly possible. The Belgians have already done it. They have got a fast, exactly the kind of force that I've just described, policing their own waters and intercepting dinghies that have launched from Belgian shores and required them to go back to Belgian shores. Now, if they can do it in the sea off the coast of Belgium, they can do it in the British territorial waters. It comes to the same thing. I don't buy the nonsense that faced with British military, uh, these illegal migrants would continue to chart a course to the United Kingdom. I don't buy it. They would understand that they're not going to be allowed to cross and they go back to France.
Yeah, and I think that's clear. Everybody's looking for the deterrent. We want to stop it looking so appealing to come here. If you've got very strict rules and regulations, and you know you're going to be sent back straight away, you don't bother coming. Polls also show 60% support for mass deportations. What about integrated families or NHS workers? Are there any sort of exceptions that you would allow?
Well, the reversal of ILR status that I mentioned only applies to under this government, granted by this government. And the reason I've drawn the line there is because this is effectively the Boris wave that this government is dealing with. You know, Boris allowed 5 million foreigners into the country during his tenure as prime minister. And preventing them from getting indefinite leave to remain is critical for this country's future. And if Starmer is stupid enough to grant them indefinite leave to remain, we must revoke it. And I think the fact that a political party such as Advance has now said it, that it will be revoked, all those people who are having it granted to them are under notice. And the Labour government is under notice. So it shouldn't come as any shock to them if Advance wins and we revoke it. It should be perfectly acceptable. And that's why it's important to say it now. I think that it is more challenging to go back 10 years, 15 years and say all those people who were granted it 15 years ago are going to have to go back. That's more challenging. But that doesn't prohibit Advance UK having consensual arrangements with people saying, look, we've got a problem in our own country with far too many foreigners being here. Can we reach an agreement with you to go back to your own home country? Is there an amelioration that we can provide you to make that journey, more palatable, etc.
Yeah.
I think that discussion also has to be had, and that's not it's not an aggressive discussion. It's not an outlandish extremist discussion. It's one that we just need to have. This is our country.
Yeah, and I don't think that's certainly have a discussion, work out the practicalities. And another big case in the last few hours was the Gazan students allowed to bring their families to Britain. You posted you thought it was utter lunacy were the words that you used. Students say they couldn't take up scholarships unless they were allowed to come with relatives. How would you deal with them?
But why can't they take up scholarships without relatives? Why? What? They need someone to cook for them and clean for them. That's absolute garbage. And the language used by the government to justify bringing them in was all the human rights language again, that these people have suffered for the last 2 years at the hands of the Israelis, etc., etc. That's got nothing to do with education, nothing to do with this person getting a scholarship coming to this country. And we've got far too many people coming here for education anyway, frankly, using effectively state subsidized education for foreigners. That's how it's working out. And to bring families with them, I think Rishi Sunak was going to stop it. I can't remember if he did stop it or not. But to bring families with you is an absolute crazy proposition as a student. I wouldn't even allow people with work visas to bring their families with them. You're coming here to work. You're coming here to study. Come here, do the business that you need to do. If you want to be with your families, don't come.
Yeah.
Stay at home with your family.
Okay, very, very simple, very clear. Another appalling case was this migrant sex offender, Hadush Kibata, who was, we found out, given £500 to be deported to Ethiopia following his mistaken release from prison. A couple of issues to unpack there. Firstly, this mistaken release. Give me your comments on that.
So, I'm not an expert in procedures, but you would have thought being let out of a prison cell onto the streets requires a few forms to be signed and a few keys and locks to be turned. It is an absolute disgrace that he was allowed back out onto the streets. Absolute disgrace. And I don't accept that somehow this happened inadvertently. Someone must have known who this guy was in the police station, wherever he was detained, and someone made a decision to release him. It was a positive decision. It wasn't a mistake. They didn't leave the door open and he walked out. It's absolute garbage the way it's been portrayed. It's a sign, again, yet another sign of a system that simply isn't working.
Well, it was a farce, wasn't it? Because he was wandering around looking lost. He thought he was going to be deported. He was given this 500 quid apparently when he came back again. But he was wandering outside, and there's all sorts of imagery everywhere. And what we've discovered is 262 criminals were accidentally released from custody last year. How do we prevent these mistakes from happening?
Well, we've obviously got a police force, which, again, just doesn't know its job. And I'm seeing this right around. I don't know whether you get this feeling. I know we talk about broken public services, etc. Our councils right across the United Kingdom are effectively bust. But I'm seeing something more pervading, more broader taking place, an inability of this country to function at the most basic level now. And I think this is a result of mass immigration, DEI, employing the wrong people in the jobs that require people, who are better qualified, etc., to do it, but they haven't got them because they're the wrong color or something. And we're seeing an undermining of our own ability to simply function as a country. And one of the things that really horrified me, I don't know if it'll horrify other people in the same way it horrified me, but I went to the government website the other day. And when you write English, if you're writing English properly, you don't use abbreviations, certainly not on a government website where you're trying to communicate clearly. And it was littered with grammatical mistakes and abbreviations. That means the very people who are communicating government policy to the people actually don't know how to communicate it clearly. This is a recipe for disaster.
Absolutely, I mean, it's scandalous, and these commas and wrong sort of apostrophes and your
Yeah,
and all that sort of stuff. It is
absolutely.
appalling. It screams out. So they should be able to sort that out. It's been revealed, and going back to Kibatu, he was handed what's called a discretionary payment of £500, and this was apparently to avoid lengthy legal challenge. Also, he made threats to disrupt his removal. Was it right to give him that money?
Well, the lesson from it is that if the money was needed to avoid a lengthy legal challenge, it's self-evident that the law is wrong. And Starmer should have learnt from that lesson. He should have said, look, we had to give this guy 500 quid to get out of our own country. I'm going to change the law. He hasn't done that, has he? He hasn't done that. He hasn't come out and said the law's wrong in the way that I've just said on this podcast, the law is wrong. And he gave 500 quid to this guy. It's, I mean, frankly, I want the guy out of the country. Giving him 500 quid is not the way to do it. But if that's the best our bloomin' useless government can do, at least get rid of this guy. Pay every illegal migrant 500 quid, get him out, enforce our borders. The problem with doing that is that if you give them 500 quid to leave, they go, well, if we go back to the UK, we get another 500 quid. We get a 4-star hotel, we get whatever, free medical care, and then we'll be there for 6 months. It's a bit of a holiday, and we get 500 quid and a free flight home.
Yeah.
So
We've talked about, as you say, there's no magic money tree, but you've elaborated on how you're going to fund a lot of these things and the savings that will be made. Let's look at welfare tax and your wonderful phrase about bonk for Britain. You talk about slashing taxes for workers and middle
yeah.
classes and ending all foreign benefits, ending child benefits, replacing them with a marriage child stay-at-home tax allowances. Talk to me a bit more then about how you finance it. Is that all coming from the same pot with those savings we've talked about?
Well, we haven't done an economic policy yet. We haven't set out our economic policies, but there will be dramatic cost savings that we're going to make in the country. We are wasting a lot of money. We're badly spending money, and we can identify those areas. And when our manifesto is published, we will show precisely where we're going to do cuts. And cuts are going to be really at the foremost of our thinking, because we've got to stop spending money we don't have. We've got to stop doing it. But when it comes to building our country and protecting our country, protecting our society, our culture, etc., we must also be prepared to spend money, or at least allow people to keep the money that they earned in order to give effect to the change in society that's needed to restore our country. And that's what I'm trying to do with the suggestion of those tax allowances. And the reason I want to do it through tax allowances rather than actually just putting money in people's pockets is when you do it through tax allowances, you're rewarding work. You're saying if you work, then you will be able to get married more easily. You will be able to have children more cost effectively. One of you will be able to stay at home more cost effectively. But you've got to be working for that to get that benefit. The problem with the child benefit system, the way it works at the moment, is that it rewards people who are not working. It says to people, basically, even if you don't work, we're going to give you money to have more children. And Farage, Reform, want to remove the child cap. And this is why I get confused with Reform. Are they for reducing state spending or not? It's 3,000 quid, roughly, broadly. There's a complicated formula, but it's roughly 3,000 quid per child under the benefit system. That £3,000 should be delivered through a tax allowance of up to £3,000, not through £3,000 in your pocket.
Yeah, as your message is clear, you make it pay to work. You're going to raise it threshold, I think, said to 20,000, and that would lift millions out of tax. Enforcing benefit caps, however, how do you do that for those who can but do not work without invasive surveillance?
Well, there are 8 million people on universal credit at the moment. There were 1 million people on universal credit in 2018. That's how dramatically our country is imploding. Um, Around 3 or 4 million of those 8 million are claiming mental health issues, not even looking for work. That is the area that needs real scrutiny. I'm sure there are people with genuine mental health issues that prohibit them from working. But there are millions of people who are malingering, and we have to take a very tough approach. And we may make mistakes. There may be some genuine hard cases that are created by the dramatic savings that need to be made. And we may make mistakes, and we will have to correct those mistakes if we make them. But we must first cut that bill and make sure the country can afford the money that it's spending. We are spending way too much on welfare and benefits. It's got to stop.
Yeah, and as you say, and for those who genuinely need it, and I think that's the question, they'll continue to receive it, but it's just trying to work out how do you determine somebody genuinely needs it?
Yeah, so as I say, I think there'll be a dramatic reduction in that spending, and mistakes may be made in that direction. I'm
Yeah.
afraid that's a necessary reality now of correcting the position of the pendulum, because they've allowed it to swing far too much in the wrong direction.
Yeah, I guess it's just how that works in practice. There'll be people watching this and think, well, okay, how are they going to enforce that? Are we going to require to do more forms? Are they getting more
Well,
assessment? Is it going to be
I mean,
more
you can
surveillance?
be quite draconian. You can say no one gets it after a year, you know.
Okay.
You've got 1 year to get yourself together.
Okay.
I
And if
haven't
they
thought.
don't?
So now you're delving into deep policy points, and that's why I was reluctant to put out a policy sort of tweet, but I was under pressure to indicate the direction of travel. But we are going to bed. So I just wanted to put out some headlines,
Yeah.
which is what you've got. But we are going to be dramatic in cutting welfare. Political parties don't want to talk about cutting welfare before an election. They don't want to do it. Reform's not doing it. The Tories aren't doing it. Labour couldn't even get a 1.67% reduction in the welfare bill through Parliament the other day. Do you remember?
Yeah.
They couldn't, a minute reduction in welfare, they couldn't get it through because they're all pandering for votes. But we've got to have a very long, hard, honest conversation with the British people. If we're to balance the books and make this a prosperous country again, we've got to cut welfare. It's got to be people who work that get rewarded, not people who are staying at home. And as much as the welfare state needs to exist for those who genuinely can't work, who are transitioning from a job, out of job, and then back into the workplace, as much as that is needed, it's got to be people who work that get rewarded. And we've got to be very tough on people who are just sitting at home, for long periods doing nothing.
Yeah. And the details, you say that's all going to come out. And we did preface this by saying, obviously, that's going to be discussed by the college and you'll come out with policies and we can come back and
Yeah.
go down into those sort of details afterwards. And I get the same is going to be about how you measure responsible childbearing to avoid abuse of the family tax allowance. Obviously, in a post-digital ID world, how's this even trackable without Big Brother returning?
Well, you know whether you've had a child or not, and whether you're in
Well,
employment or not.
responsible childbearing, that I think that's the question, isn't it?
Well, I think it's all responsible. If you're working and you're only getting it's a tax allowance, so it's up to £3,000 of savings in your tax. So if you're a basic rate taxpayer, that's £15,000 of income would go tax free to have a child. Are you with me?
Yeah.
It's very easily done. I think that's no problem because the mother delivers a child. There's physical evidence that she's had a child.
Yes, I think it's the test. Yes, absolutely. There's physical evidence she's had it. It's a question of whether it's responsible and so on and so forth. But again, detail will come
But
out.
no, but it's by definition responsible because you're only getting the money through the tax break. If you want to go off and have children and you can't afford it, well, that's your prerogative. Don't expect the state to bail you out. But if your husband's working, he will get up to 15,000 tax allowance. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah.
Fifteen
Okay.
thousand. So a £3,000 per child tax break,
Right.
effectively.
Okay. Let's then look at education and the indoctrination of our children. You want that to cease. You've got teachers'
Yeah.
unions threatening strikes. Curriculum. What curriculum advance would you mandate? Victorian values or bolder? And how do you enforce it without parental opt-outs fracturing communities?
Oh, but we won't give parents opt-outs of basic fundamental education. We need to find our way back to freedom of speech in society and freedom of speech in our institutions. At the moment, the Equality Act allows our educational establishments to sell BS, basically. And, the DEI strains run right through all our establishments, education and otherwise. I don't know, just quick digression. Did you see the letter put out by the head of the military the other day saying that we've got to be more inclusive and more welcoming to this, that, and the other in the
Oh yes,
military?
and
Didn't
Charles was
they?
out celebrating that sort of side as well.
I know. It's like, come on, guys. We haven't got a military that could stand up and fight at the moment. You spend your money and your energy creating a first-class military again.
I
But the
think I
same
think
applies.
the real test is effectiveness, isn't it? I want us to be
Yeah,
blind, deaf, and dumb to all sorts of other factors, race, color,
absolutely.
creed. It has to be about effectiveness, doesn't it?
Everything's got to be meritocracy. Everything's got to be meritocracy. And that might sound tough, but that's the only way you create a first-class society. It's got to be
Yeah, can
meritocratic.
you do the job? It's
Then
simple.
you do the job, and you're the best guy or girl for the job. Yeah, so that it's basic. But schools are hijacked by DEI, they're hijacked by critical race theory, they're hijacked by the notion that they're hijacked also by the Human Rights Act because effectively teachers now want to rewrite history to try and equate humanity. And so We even had David Lammy talking about black excellence. I mean, what do you mean black excellence? We just want excellence for Britain, don't we? It's like, get off this nonsense. So schools have got to stop teaching critical race theory, which informs children that if they're white, they're privileged. If they don't recognize the privilege, they're racist. They've got to stop teaching gender ideology. This notion that a boy identifying as a girl can be a girl and go into girls' toilets, that's got to stop. Um, they've got to stop talking about the climate emergency at school as if it settles science. I don't even want to have the debate, but there's got to be an honest debate about science. Science all turns on the ability to challenge. And that applies obviously to religious ideologies as well. They've got to be capable of being challenged. When I was brought up in this country, I was taught the synoptic gospels. That was what we did for O level. And we went round all the Mark, Matthew, Luke, John. We went round all of them. We discussed how they evolved, the oral tradition, how some of it was allegorical, some of it was perhaps literal, and how it was meant to be reflected through its meaning rather than the actual words that we were listening to. And we challenged it, we debated it. Some people agreed, some didn't disagree. We've stopped doing that. We're not, the word Islamophobia, we're teaching other religions in schools and we're not allowing people to challenge those religions. Islamophobia has gripped our society. Shabana Mahmood says she's going to ditch the definition of Islamophobia, but she's going to bring in a definition of anti-Muslimness. Whatever, that's the same thing from another, so our children at school won't be able to challenge Islam. They'll challenge perhaps Christianity if they even get taught Christianity, but they won't be able to challenge Islam because it'll be anti-Muslimness and so on.
I guess my point is, so what curriculum would you put forward then? I mean, in terms of those sort of, would you go back to some of the values that you had and you mentioned when you were being
Yeah,
brought up?
yeah, and I think I'd go further. I think we've got to get the schools to sing the national anthem, to sing hymns. Every child's got to sing hymns at morning assembly and the national anthem. And every state school's got to have a Union flag out the front.
Okay,
And if you're
and I
an
guess
England, the
that's
St
the
George's
question
flag.
then, and you've given the answer, I think, already. But parents who strongly objected to that, they
I don't
wouldn't
care.
be able to opt out. Tough.
This is the United Kingdom. It's our flag. It's our anthem. There are our hymns. We're constitutionally a Christian country. You don't like it, it's too bad. You're free to practice your religion, whatever your religion is. No one's gonna persecute you for your religion. But when you go to education establishments in the United Kingdom, you will be taught about being British, and being British is being Christian.
Okay, very, very clear. We're going to take another quick break. When we come back, more of those policies. Don't touch that dial.